if there's a program that is currently using drug testing, breathalyzers, anything, or like asking people and screening people out because of substances, and they want to do something different, right? They're watching this video right now because they're like, yeah, we're doing this thing, but we're not wild about it. What else are the options? What are some ways that they could get started in doing something different?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to really understand what a liability is and isn't, because usually that's the default language that comes along with that. We can't have folks that use and shelter, it's a liability. For who, for what does that mean? And really, when we look at it, being aware of like federal regulation doesn't apply to survivors in program. It only applies to staff. So you can't, well, they're also, so not only does like a federal law not apply to survivors, so you can't say that that's part of it. They're also protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, where you can't ask what somebody's on medication for. So if somebody is engaging in cannabis use, you cannot ask. We put out a lot of resources around that. So just familiarizing yourself with what stipulations actually really don't exist that we think do. Really understanding what is and isn't a liability based on like what your funder provides for the policy people that are, we have to follow the policy and the policy say this. Really looking at those options, making sure we're being inclusive, but really just understanding how harmful those things can be, and really taking back and asking why. Why are we asking somebody for a urine sample to access safe shelter? How does that impact them engaging in our services? And the answer is it doesn't. You're prioritizing victimization based on somebody's experience and their response to trauma, right? Which is indirect conflict of what we do. So really taking a step back and looking at what it is you're doing and why you're doing that, starting to have conversations around trauma, right? Because it sounds like if that's kind of where your program's at, we need to start talking about trauma and understanding trauma, historical trauma, responses to trauma, secondary trauma, because it sounds like there's a lot going on there of internalizing that and just kind of being like, whatever. And really taking a look at how to be survivor centered and really focus on how your services and look at how your services are or are not being like supporting people, because folks take that into the community of like, this isn't a safe place, right? You shouldn't go there. They made me take a test for no reason, but also the resources that are being wasted on upholding those things that are harmful and essentially like illegal, because you can't base emergency shelter on a drug test. Think of what you can put that funding into for survivors, right? Because that's not benefiting anybody aside from the program and advocates, and thinking about how that upholds the power differential that already exists, that we're really trying to navigate carefully between the advocate and survivor, right? Because again, you're this like figurehead of the system that holds the resources. So it's another layer of gatekeeping. So it's important that we name that and recognize that and start to think about how we can undo some of that. Which I know is a heavy conversation, but it's important, right? Because we can be using that resources towards like relocation funding to help somebody get an apartment, to find safe and stable housing that may help them in their journey to recovery, because that may be the option of they have chronic homelessness, they have nowhere else to go, right? And that might help someone. So really just reevaluating kind of why you're doing it and really rethinking like, who are your services actually for? Because if the answer is not survivors, and if your policies are only for staff and the program to keep them safe, it's time to reevaluate, because we're not centering the survivor and their needs, which is why we exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, so much food for thought as people really, look at those practices and think critically about them and really reflect on them and think about paths forward. So a lot of options there. Thank you. It's I think it's happening much more than people talk about, unfortunately, because it is against voluntary services. It is against federal regulations. And I truly believe that people want to do better. They're just not sure how, right? So reach out to us at the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. Jessa, I'm sure you're happy to be a resource as well.
Yes.
And if you're trying to figure out how to stop screening out and how to not ask people to submit to drug testing and breathalyzers, there's lots of help to help kind of traverse that change.